All right, round three of Heritage Bytes, and boy, do we have an exciting guest today. And here in Heritage Bytes, the one and only rule is to bring a snack and to tell everyone why you brought that snack. I'm Rio. I co-founded the AI startup Dokai, and Heritage Bytes is a platform that we're using to shine a light on the amazing culture and unique insights of all my amazing guests. We'll definitely dive deeper into their careers, experiences, and how they see the potential for technology and AI, but it's mostly about culture and great food. So with that, let's get snacking. So my guest today here is a rock star in Silicon Valley and Korea and probably other places as well. He's a role model for founders like myself. His name is Kyum, and he co-founded the platform Blind. You've probably heard about it, but if you haven't, you're definitely missing out. Blind has more than millions of active monthly users globally. For those who don't know, Blind is a platform that provides an anonymous forum and community for verified employees to communicate. And these dynamics make Blind a vibrant community for employees everywhere to discuss careers, workplace dynamics, and connect with others. And back when I had a normal corporate job before being a founder, I was definitely a big Blind user and a fan of the platform. I was absolutely geeking out when I first met Kyum a few weeks ago. And since then, we've shared a few drinks, a few bites, and some conversations, and now I'm a big fan of Kyum as well. So without further ado, welcome. Annyeong, how you doing, Kyum Oppa?
안녕하세요. Yeah, thanks for having me here. You definitely have that podcast voice, and I'm so flattered by
Oh, wow.
your intro.
Podcast voice, huh? Okay, man. Hey, before we go any further, first and foremost, we got to grab our snacks, man. This is an essential part of this podcast. Can I show you what I brought?
Oh, sure.
All right. This here is, surprise, surprise, another Indonesian snack. It's called
Mhm.
pilus. It's a popular Indonesian snack. It's essentially round little crackers. It's small little balls, but they pack in a lot of flavor.
Mm.
Sounds kind of wrong. But anyway, I I grew up eating these, especially late at night, because growing up in Indonesia, soccer games were played super late Indonesia time. And I was watching a lot of Man United and, of course, the one and only Park Ji-sung, Three Lungs
Mhm.
Park. So these accompanied me on a lot of late nights, and it's a very nostalgic snack for me. Enough about my snack. Kim, what did you bring for us today, man?
Yeah, I brought some rice puffs. So it literally says white rice puffs, I guess, and this is 100% rice. So it doesn't have any other flavors. Um, Korean rice tastes good without flavors. So should I unpack it and show it what it looks like?
Yeah, you'll have to tell us what it tastes like as well. So
Yeah.
unpack it.
Uh, so it looks like this. And when I was growing up, I used to when I'm like coming back home from school, uh, there used to be um people who make these, usually like mid-aged men, who have these like devices. Uh, and they used to make these into size of like my almost my face. Like it used
Wow.
to be huge, and they would stack it up, put it in a transparent plastic bag, and I think a whole bag costs maybe $1 or two back then. So I would like pick one of those from those guys, and then I would bring one of those home and just eat it with my family. And this is called bongchigi, which is bong is like the sound um the device makes when they puff rice. So it's like bong. And tigi is, I think it means puffs or something like that. But so when these men make these snacks, kids would just gather around the device because they want to hear the sound and they would really get excited. And then um the guy who makes it, he would say something like "bongyo," which means like "here it goes," and then they would make these and hand it out to a couple kids if they're around. So yeah, it just tastes like rice. It's very, see, you can hear the
Ah.
sound and very crunchy. Mm. Um, the flavors are very subtle, which I like. I don't like snacks that are kind of overpowering. Um, Even now, like my favorite snacks are like nuts or just uh, water crackers and things like that. The only downside is it makes me really thirsty because it's very dry.
Bong Hyo. Is that what they said?
Yeah,
The
bongyo.
sellers. Oh,
Yeah,
Bong Hyo.
yeah.
But then your snack is called a Bong Jigi?
Bongchigi. Yeah, bongchigi. Yeah,
Mm.
and I got a bunch of like flakes here that I need to clean up now, and I won't be eating this anymore because I'll be really thirsty. And I don't want to
Oh
be
man.
drinking water like
Oh man.
for an
That's
hour for yeah.
definitely nostalgic to remember those times when we were kids and just surrounding the food, street food vendors. But
Yeah.
that's awesome, man. Where did you grow up? Speaking of growing up, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Seoul. I was born there. I was raised there. Um, I did spend about 5.5 years in the US, 2 years in LA when I was four, and 3.5 years near Washington, D.C., from late elementary school to middle school. But outside of that, I lived in Seoul. Seoul's my hometown. I love it. I want to go back every time I get a chance.
It's cold right now this time of year, though, right? Over there.
Yeah, the weather there I mean, the weather in California where I live, it's all through the year, the weather's pretty much the same. And today's kind of a cold day, but in Korea, it's freezing, it's snowing. And in the summer, it's like humid and everyone's like sweating. There's like ton of air conditioning everywhere. So that's kind of the weather that I'm used to. So this is very kind of um, I guess I got used to the California weather, but sometimes I miss kind of the chills. When you get your winter jacket on, and when you put it on and you go out in the winter, you kind of feel the chills in that
Yeah.
kind of cold wind into your nose, and I actually felt very nostalgic when I went back to Korea this last November because it was cold and it was something that for some reason I missed it.
Were there parts of your culture and heritage growing up in Korea that shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I think definitely I have to start with my parents. My mother, she was always a giver, so I think what she practiced kind of derives out of the mindset where if I have something and if I give this to someone and it's gonna make that person feel better, and if it has more value to the other person, she would just give it to the other person. So if I have a bottle of water and if I'm not thirsty, she would
Mhm.
just give it to a thirsty person. And that's something that I came to kind of embrace. And some of the things that she did was she would always just take care of the family, like cousins, whenever they have trouble in their lives. And I think she was one of I see this a lot on like TikTok and Instagram right now, where these people are leaving snacks for delivery people outside the door. She started doing that like 15 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think she's one of the first people in the world to do that.
Yeah, the
And
OG.
yeah, and those are the things that are, and we used to get notes from delivered people saying that they were so moved and it kind of made their day because they're hungry and they're thirsty, and my mom kind of knows that. So um, my mom's side, I kind of learned how to be a giver and how valuable that is, and if you give without asking for a return, it actually comes back in very incredible ways. And my dad, he used to work for the government for 30 years, and he was a people person. When I was living in Washington, D.C., I mean, near Washington, D.C., Korea was a very, uh, it was not as prominent country as now, and I think he had to do a lot of things to make things work as a government, like as a diplomat, um, like internally within the diplomat community and the outside. So whenever what I remember a lot is because we always used to have a lot of people in my house drinking and partying, and I had no idea what they were doing because they are diplomats who work in the Korean embassy, and they would just come to my house and they would just have fun. And later, I learned that my dad had to do that in order for him to get things done, to build relationships. And because my mom was a giver, she would make all the food. She would uh, make people like uh, she would be a good host. And for me, I would play games with other kids around the house. And I can talk about this later, but this actually impacted how I did go to market for for blind, because that's the exact same way I did go to market in Seattle. So I can talk about that later. The last thing is my full name is Song Kyum. So my last name is Kim, and most Korean names have Chinese characters, are built with Chinese characters, and each Chinese character, as you know, some listeners know, have a meaning. So Song means to achieve, and Kyum means to be humble. So depending on the interpretation, it could mean I have to achieve humbleness, if that's a word, or even if I achieve, I should be humble. That was kind of like the name, and I think kind of having humility and hardworking, these are kind of embedded in the Asian culture, and I and in the Korean culture as well. Uh, and going back and forth from Korea and the US, I did have to kind of adjust, and I did have to um, kind of adapt myself into how I express my humility and how to be humble in different contexts. But that has always kind of carried me into my life, where even if I am kind of well off, or I have a good job or whatever achievements that I have, I should have humility. And that's one of the most important virtues that I have, in my opinion.
I love that. I think you touched on so many amazing characteristics of the culture you grew up in: generosity, thoughtfulness, thinking about others as well, and, building genuine relationships. That's beautiful. I think it's a perfect transition to going into your experience at Blind Man. It sounded like you were able to bring some of these essences of your culture to being a successful founder at Blind. So feel free to touch on that, and also take us through the story, man. I'm at the edge of my seat here.
um, I think I can start with like in the time order. And so when I first came to the US for blind, I did I did go to elementary school, middle school in the US, but I didn't have any work experience. I didn't go to college here. So I spoke English, but I didn't really know how to communicate with people here. And going back and forth from US to Korea when I was young, I developed this survival mechanism of just self-deprecating humor, which is very popular in Korea.
Hmm.
So I used to just make fun of myself all day in Korea. That would work. When I did that in the Silicon Valley, it was funny because like this one time I went to this networking event. I was talking to people, and I was like, oh, I said something like, oh, I'm dumb, or I was just like doing my usual thing. And then the response I got is like, no, you shouldn't say that. You're wonderful. you're you're awesome. You're amazing. And that was just so awkward to me. Like, how do I handle this? Because it's just different culture, right? So I think it's not that people in the Silicon Valley don't have humility or they're not humble. It's just the way they express.
Yep.
The values are very different. So I had to kind of adapt to that. So I think how that played out is when I was starting to get users from for blind, I tried to get users from very different demographics, like different ethnicities, different backgrounds. But what I notice is that I'm a fob. I'm not really able to interact with people um, that well in the US, at least back then, 10 years ago. So what I did in Seattle is I made friends with a couple of Korean people at Amazon, and I found out where they lived, and I moved into the same apartment complex and turned the apartment into a party house.
Kind of
And
like your dad, huh?
yeah, so we invited all the Korean people who worked at Amazon, like days, like almost every day, to just party and have fun, play Korean music, play the guitar, and cook Korean food. I think I cooked the most barbecue in my life in that time period, and then rest of my life, and that worked because I was just genuinely trying to make connections, and I was just giving away a lot of things. I was giving them food. I was providing them a place to just have fun, and then uh, something amazing happened, which is they started telling me things like about their company, their work life, and that is what Blind is about. It's about talking about workplace challenges. So in a few weeks, maybe a few months, I knew more about Amazon work life than Amazon employees themselves. So I was actually giving advice to them about their salaries because I knew how much salary they're going to get if they get promoted to a certain level. And then that kind of powered Blind because now we knew exactly what kind of content people wanted, what kind of things, what kind of conversations that people wanted to have on Blind. So by building these relationships, we were able to just extract a lot of information from people. And that I think that effectively served as like a customer discovery, which
Yeah.
I didn't know back then that it was customer discovery. I didn't even know the term.
That's awesome. Sounded like a Korean barbecue field customer discovery session there for a few months.
Yeah. So every time you come to barbecue, right, you have to write a content. That was kind of the deal.
I love that though. It's kind of like full circle, kind of like, you growing up seeing your dad throw those parties and
Yeah.
then you doing it. Was that kind of like the early days, one of the pivotal moments for Blind? And then was that like kind of where you got your first few sets of users in the US, or was that maybe a little later on in the journey? Tell us about the early days there.
Yeah, this was the very first thing that we did. So, talking about like successful startups, I get inspired by a lot of founding stories. I think a common pattern is there's a founder who goes out, meets a ton of users before they launch something, and then they find patterns and they build a product or MVP and they launch it. And in the first in the very first stages, what they do is they gotta do things that don't scale, right? They gotta go talk to users like one by one. And I, again, I didn't know that I was doing it, but later that I found out, I actually did it. The parties were customer discovery, like discovery conversations, and the first 100 users I think I have met in person, and I had a lunch with or dinner with or I had a drink with, and those people seeded the community, and then Amazon, I think uh Blind has signed up like 150 Amazon employees so far when I left. So yeah.
That's amazing. So going from 100 though to what Blind is today, it's so ingrained in the work culture here, especially in Silicon Valley. Like everyone has a Blind account. What did you guys really nail? Like, how did you guys scale to that size?
um I think once we found out about Amazon, like what these people want to talk about, we found out that a lot of similar things, same things actually translate to other companies. So every company has levels. Every company has information discrepancy between lev- different layers in the company, and there are things people are uncomfortable talking about with their face attached because of the hierarchy of the company, and also peer pressure. And those are the kind of patterns that we found when we were talking to people at Amazon. So when I was living in Seattle, the second company obviously was Microsoft because there's a huge campus right next to Seattle. So we did the same thing. We just invited Microsoft employees to my house and threw parties. And after that, what we did was we created this industry space where Amazon and Microsoft employees can talk to each other. And that's when we started like paid marketing to Google employees, Facebook employees, now Meta, Twitter, now X, like those employees, we started marketing to those employees. And later this industry channel got bigger because there were a lot of things that people want to talk about within the company, but there were more things that they wanted to talk across the company because a lot of people are looking for jobs and they want to know how much a Twitter employee back then made if they're interested in like applying for the company and so on and so forth. And there are like layoffs everywhere in America. So whenever there's like tech news about a CEO, people want to talk about it. And it kind of went from there. So once we kind of figured it out, I don't think we did anything like that sophisticated. We just kind of um, stuck with our playbook of going company by company, growing this industry channel. Once new company kind of um, once a new company stacks up enough users, we would do more marketing on that company, and then that company would just grow organically.
It's amazing. I think the ability to find patterns like you did is so critical there. It reminds me of something we briefly chatted about, and maybe you can confirm for the people. Is it true that the show, The Office, inspired you guys in some way? Were there patterns or insights that you got from watching that show? I got to ask because I'm
Mm.
such a big fan of that show.
Yeah, I gotta say that Blind had six co-founders, and we were all Korean people. We None of us had college degrees in the U.S. None of us had any work experience in the U.S. So we had no idea what working in the U.S. looked like. So our only reference was TV shows, and and I happened to have watched like The Office because I love that kind of humor. Like that's kind of my kind of show. I also love the British version, by the way.
Mhm.
Um, and watching it made us think that people who work at companies behave in similar ways. They have water cooler conversations. They talk behind their boss's back, and um, most people hate going to work. And that just gave us confidence that maybe blind can also work in the US as well,
Mm.
and even globally.
Were there like any early day stories or, memorable moments that you still think about, especially as you look back now from this point of view?
Um, I think there's too many. I can't think about just one. Uh, and I remember things like getting a text message from a user. Um, in the very early days, I think we had like 150 users, and then and she was a friend, and so she sent me a text message saying her coworker has told her that blind is so addictive,
Mm.
and I think I was working with this other guy named Alex Shin back then, and we were um walking home from probably a happy hour or something, and we just high fived like six years because that I think that's when we felt like we had product market fit.
Wow.
And we didn't really think about the word product market fit. Yeah. Yeah. We were just so happy that someone thought blind was addictive. And that was kind of the beginning of kind of having confidence in what we do because we weren't sure when we first came here. Um, and I think the second moment, which I think we got a little bit lucky, is there was a New York Times article about Amazon's culture. And um, uh, people on blind had a very different narrative from people outside of blind. People outside of blind was mostly defending a company. I mean, they have the right to do that. And I think they were being genuine because it's their experience. But people who actually had a bad experience at Amazon, they were talking about it online. And, and before, they didn't have a channel.
Mm.
So what I what I noticed then is, oh, we are becoming something that is very uniquely positioned that the incumbents cannot do. So that's another moment that I remember. And there's too many. I've been at the company for almost 10 years, so I can just talk about it all day, but let me know if this is enough or you want more. Yeah.
No, that's amazing. A lot of very meaningful moments there that you just shared. I think I'd love to open it up to you for to share some advice. There's a lot of, especially here in Silicon Valley, a lot of startup founders here, not just here, even where I'm from in Indonesia, a lot of startup founders there too.
Mm,
And doing this ain't easy, man. So
mm.
what sort of advice do you have, especially for early stage founders, and especially when it comes to where they should focus their time on?
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna talk about my version of Paul Graham's "Do Things That Don't Scale." Um, and the way I talk to early stage founders about it is don't don't play the probability game. So if you're doing like a paid ad, for example, you're basically um, you have to think about CTRs, you have to think about conversion rates, you have to think about what people are going to do within your product. It's all probabilities. And in the early stages, if you multiply all that, it just goes to zero. The and in the early stage, what you got to do is you got to either have a yes or a no. So if you go to a customer and do a lot and talk about and learn about the customer, and at the end talk about your product, they're either gonna say yes or no, and they're gonna give you a reason. The more you do that, I think it's gonna help you learn um, what you're building is actually valuable to the market or not. And and before you do that, don't ever spend money on marketing. Don't do PR. Don't meet PCs. Don't do anything. So I always tell people just go out and meet the customers first, and do that for like 6 months at least, and that's gonna save you 6 years.
And how about those that are, you know, they want to be entrepreneurs or startup founders, but they're kind of hesitant to take the leap? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it's very hard and it's very time consuming, and you know, and it's not a rational choice to be an entrepreneur in my opinion. So I my advice is just do what you want to do. Um, And I think staying corporate is perfectly okay. You can make a good living and you can have a good life. Um, but my way of thinking about things is so a lot of people ask me, like, why are you taking such a risky path
Mm.
with your career? Why do you always work in startups? And even now, I've been off work for about a year. I've been just advising companies, and I've had some opportunities in front of me where I can just get a salary. But I want to build something early stage or start my own company right now. Why do you do that? People ask me, and my answer to that is, for me, it's actually more risky to be in a corporate
Hmm.
because I'm not learning how to build. And when I get older, I want to still be building something. It doesn't have to be like a company. It doesn't have to be like for profit anything. It doesn't have to be for making money. I just need to be building something, and that's something that's gonna make me much, much more happier than being at a corporate for 30 years and retiring and then looking elsewhere for things to do and realizing that I haven't really built anything. So that's my perspective. And there's nothing wrong with the corporate life,
Yeah.
but it's just the way I think. And as an entrepreneur, I think you got to have that mindset of, do you want to be a builder? And do you want to be someone who can start things from scratch and Are you confident on having fun with it? And the most important part is, do you feel like that's actually something that's going to save you at the end?
It's amazing. That's beautiful. That's I definitely resonate with that. I do miss having, part of having a corporate job back then was having access to blind, which I do miss that experience. Now it makes no sense for me to have a blind, session just for me and my co-founder to talk shit about each other. So that's one thing I miss.
Yeah.
Last topic of the day that I'd like to ask you about, Kyum, is around AI, right? This is all the hype and jazz today. So you're a father of two, and you're also a technologist, entrepreneur. Going forward, how are you thinking about AI, not just for your own career, but also for your kids, man, your
Yeah.
daughter and your son?
Yeah. I think I think a lot of people said it a million times, but just building things have become much more easier. There are it was even easy 2 years ago when there were all these like no code tools and which you can learn in a span of a few days or weeks. But now you can literally like enter prompt and AI will build things for you. So I think uh that's exciting for me because when I look at tools like Replit, I see people building things for their household. They build like baby feeding tracker for their family, and it's just a prompt, right? So um, that's exciting for me because I want more people to just appreciate building stuff. It's really fun, and that requires a lot of creativity. And arguably, creativity is the only thing that's left in people when you compete with AI. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective. And for the kids, I think um, this is the perspective that I'm gonna uh, give to my daughter, which is probably gonna be irrelevant when she actually starts to work because the world is changing so fast, and I'm not even sure she's gonna listen to me. But yeah, I'm just gonna tell her, hey, like it's you can actually build stuff really easily. Like you can be like 10 years old now, and you can build an app. You don't need to know how to code, things like that. Yeah.
Hey, Kyum, this has been incredible. Tell us, tell the people who should be reaching out to you, and also tell them where can they find you on socials.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on X as well. I, I, but please don't message me on X. I don't, I'm not active there. Um, so LinkedIn is the best way to connect with me. If you're an early stage founder or especially founders from Asia who are trying to kind of build a business in the US, I think um, I'm one of the maybe few people that have done it. I mean, outside of like Chinese entrepreneurs, I think other countries are less represented in the US. So yeah, I'd be happy to uh, have a conversation with you guys if you're interested.
You heard him. Reach out to Kyum. He's the guy. One of the very rare successful stories of expanding to the US. But Kyum, this is super fun. Let's go grab another bite soon. Or if you're cooking up some barbecue, let me know. Happy to come. But yeah, man, this has been fun. Thank you so much for your time, bro.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me here.